Hello, friends, and welcome to Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly podcast designed to help mainstream Texans of faith understand the legislative process and help you engage with public policy in the great state of Texas. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Director of Public Witness, and I am fired up today because of the incredible event I just came from in North Texas with our North Texas Faith Votes team. I'm excited because the Texas Impact team had a chance to hang out with 100 Texans of faith representing congregations from across North Texas, and y'all, the vibes were real. People were excited to hear from faith leaders talking about what they were doing to engage people this election season. They heard from nonprofits and voting officials giving tips, tools, and resources to help engage their community. But more than anything, people were having fun. They were having conversations, connecting with leaders from other congregations, sharing best practices, and creating partnerships, and I can't wait to see where those partnerships go over the coming months. Many of us have been so anxious for so long. It was a good reminder for me that this work for justice, this work for engaging our communities, is fun when we do it in community. So I hope you're bringing together your community to make telephone calls, to write postcards, to organize rides to the polls and engage your community. But more than that, I hope you're finding joy in the work for justice. Y'all, I probably can't help you find friends unless you come to an event or join one of the Texas Impact teams with other cool Texans of faith, but we can help resource your work in your community. Make sure you check out the website at texasimpact.org and take advantage of all the tools on the Texas Faith Votes page. We make it easy for you and your congregation to do this work together. If you have questions about any of it, shoot me an email at scott@texasimpact.org. We're happy to help, but you're the ones with the local connections, so we will look forward to supporting your efforts and cheering you on. So with that, we're bringing you the Faith Leader panel from the North Texas Faith Votes event. I was excited to moderate a panel with folks who are doing the work. With us, we had Robyn Carafoil with Temple Shalom, a past president of the Temple Sisterhood and a current member of the Board of Trustees. Reverend Danielle Ayers, pastor of justice at Friendship West Baptist Church, a 12,000-member church in Dallas. Danielle is a devoted author, preacher, and teacher, and a Texas Impact board member. And finally, Reverend Cathy Sweeney, associate pastor of Adult Discipleship at Arapaho United Methodist Church. Cathy's a former real estate developer who now dedicates her life to nonprofit work, supporting people experiencing homelessness and poverty and promoting racial reconciliation. So with that, I think you're probably ready to get to it, so I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with the panel. I appreciate y'all being here, and I'm going to start out with a really hard question. Y'all, these last few months, right? It's been something. I feel like we are living through a month or two period that they're going to have college classes written about. Amen, right? There's been a lot going on. And we've had a couple of years where I think people have been feeling anxiety, where tensions are tough. Why is it especially important in this moment that faith communities are engaged in civic engagement work, that you're using your voices to make sure that our congregations and communities are engaged? And we'll start here with Robyn.
Okay. All right, I'll go first. I'm Robyn Carafoil. I'm a member here at Temple Shalom. So in Judaism, one of the key things that makes us different is our pursuit of justice and our efforts every day of the year, every day of every year. In the book of Deuteronomy, we are commanded, justice, justice, you shall pursue. We pursue justice and equality in the Jewish tradition based on the concept that all God's children are created equal. Tikkun olam is a concept in Judaism that means repairing the world. So we take care of the world and show how much we love it by helping to clean it and working toward fixing any problems that we find. We help people get along without fighting, and we try to make the world more fair and help everyone with what they need to live in a safe and healthy life. We use nice words, we avoid hurtful speech, we celebrate freedom for all people and the ability to make our own choices. In Judaism, we are commanded to uphold and protect the most vulnerable. What is hateful to you, do not do to anybody else. So individual civic engagement and mobilizing collective action to uplift our voices are important in this moment because Jewish sages of old have taught us it is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it. We're taught to be brave and keep trying to meet our goals, even if it's hard to do. So there's a lot of work to be done, and now is the time to actively pursue social justice through education, action, and advocacy.
All right. Pastor Danielle.
Sure. So first, let me thank you again for the invitation. It's always exciting to be in spaces that are interfaith because I like the idea that we can bring our full selves to the conversation and be who we are and what centers us. And so for me, to answer your question in a short way, which I'll try to do, for me, I come from a non-traditional Baptist church, right? So a lot of it is rooted and grounded in an African-centered worldview. And part of that is, what does it mean to be human? And so for us, and for me, it's important in this moment because we have lost, in my opinion, a sense of what it means to be human. And that we do not see humanity in other people, and that's evident in our policies and our laws, etc. So I think it's so important for us to, one, can we understand that fundamental fact, without religion, without spirit, just fundamentally, what does it mean to be human and to not have your humanity so diminished, like that you can humanize others. And so that's kind of where I'm centered, and then obviously as a, not just a Black Baptist, but one who believes in Black liberation theology and womanist theology. That theology, that God taught who God means to me and how I see God showing up in the world, manifesting the justice work that I do. Because for me, it is about how do we deal with systems and institutions that inherently are undergirded, right, by a version of white supremacy that continues to then create a society that was created and rooted and grounded in that. And we're constantly every day trying to battle against something that was baked into this nation. And so Black and brown, particularly communities, feel that brunt even more so. So it's Howard Thurman says, you know, in Jesus the Disinherited, he starts off one chapter by saying, many and varied are the interpretations of the life and ministry of Jesus Christ. But many of those interpretations have very little to say to those who stand in the moment in time their backs against the wall. So for me, it is that Jesus that we pull out, Luke 4:18, what I call a theological sandwich, right? Where the Spirit of the Lord is on me, you know, the theology of that God is in it. But in between that, right, I think Jesus talked about unpacking, dealing with systems, socials, bring good news to the poor. Well, that must mean, what does faith have to say? What's the good news to free people up from the bad news of poverty and exploitation? Whether that's payday lending, right? Or whether that's living in a community where you're trying to buy groceries and the prices are exorbitant, right? It makes it hard to buy food for families. And so for me, that's where it starts. It starts one, what does it mean, Ubuntu, right? What does it mean for me to disrupt and deconstruct all the isms that exist? And we can run the whole list of what those are. And so that's where it starts. So why civic engagement is so, and civic engagement is so broad, right? That can be political or non-political action. But for me, it's so important because how do you get people to see that the power has and always will lie with the people? So letting people know you do have power. How do you give that power up, but how do you use that power then to change the world, to be agents of social change, and yes, to be disruptors? I think most of us have different faith traditions, but most of all our faith calls us to be disruptors of a society, right, that is antithetical, in my opinion, to God's design and desire for all of us to live an abundant life, right? To live freely who we were designed and created to be in all of our different and various ways. And so part of civic engagement is also social cohesion. So we can only do that when I can look at someone who's different from me, who doesn't think like me, a different faith, but also understand you have just as much right to live in this world, to be your authentic self. The only time we can't agree is if your oppression and liberation is at my expense, right? But other than that, how do we find a way to make this world as such through our collective action?
Right. Love that. Cathy, same question. Why is it important in this moment?
Why is it important in this moment? I was fortunate this summer to participate in a week-long summer academy at the Center for Faith and Justice at Georgetown University, which is led by Reverend Dr. Jim Wallace, who also will be here speaking on the 28th at North Haven United Methodist Church, co-sponsored by Arapaho. You can go to North Haven's website to get tickets for that. But he's one of my, he's just amazing. And what he mentioned about why is this the right time, he brought up two different things. One is just two concepts of time. One is the chronos time, which is like the tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. We're getting there. It's most elections are chronos time. There's an event and it happens. That's chronos time. But right now is more kairos time. Kairos time and this kairos moment is an abnormal time, a time that can change time and events for decades and generation. And so not only do we have a chronos time right now, but we also have a kairos time, where what we do and say and do in this moment, leading up to this election and beyond, can change generations to help liberate people, to bring freedom and hope to the oppressed. That is incredibly important to me to know that it is an event that's coming but doesn't stop on November 5th. When I think about time, I think about creation and God's creation. And two things inform me about that with the word chaos. That the word chaos came at the beginning of creation when God calmed the waters and created the waters and the sky and the sun and the moon, and there was a calmness that came out to it. But in the New Testament, in the Christian tradition, I think it's the Gospel of Mark, there's a story of Jesus calming the seas. And similar to what Danielle was saying about Luke 4, that we can misinterpret what Jesus was saying, that the Spirit has come upon me to bring good news to the poor, can be misinterpreted. The same thing with Jesus sleeping in the middle of a storm and stood up and spoke to chaos. He spoke to chaos of a storm and calmed it. He didn't say, look, everybody, this is your spiritual time to go out and volunteer and be good. He stopped the chaos, and there's a whole lot of chaos going on right now. And so what I believe our responsibility as people of faith, whatever faith, is to listen to and read what Jesus has done, what God has done, what is being done in this chronos kairos time to stop the chaos. And only when we stop the chaos can we start healing and moving forward and making this a very instrumental time with our voices and our feet and our hands.
Yeah, I love that, right? Yeah. I do think there's chaos. And on the podcast several weeks ago, I think I framed one of the questions in terms of the anxiety that was happening in the world. And Beeman Floyd, who's our contract lobbyist, talked about joyful engagement, right? And talked about the idea that when we come together as congregations or as groups like this afternoon, there's a joy. Right? There's a joy in doing this civic engagement work. There's a joy in doing this advocacy work, but it doesn't end on election day in November. Danielle was talking earlier about what we're going to do during the legislative session. This is a movement towards justice. I think John Wesley talks about the journey towards perfection, which means we're not there yet. We've still got a lot of work to do. And you three were selected by the committee in part because of the work that your congregations are doing to engage people, hopefully joyfully, in this work, sometimes in the midst of chaos. And so this next question is really, hopefully, a resource for those who are in the room. Talk to us about what your congregations are doing, or what you hope other congregations might consider doing to engage people in this civic engagement work. And we'll start with Robyn, because I walked in today and saw the work that they were doing. I was inspired by it. Super easy thing that everyone can do. So talk to us about that.
Okay, so one of the things that we're doing here at Temple Shalom, well, first of all, I am the Social Justice Vice President for the Sisterhood, the women's organization. So we have it's official. We have social justice. Well, I already said in the beginning, Rabbi Paley says social justice is something we do every hour of every day, every year. But where Temple Shalom is participating through the Religious Action Center. The Religious Action Center is the advocacy arm for the Reformed Jewish movement. So with RAC, we are participating in the Every Voice, Every Vote campaign. The Every Voice, Every Vote campaign is about democracy, because democracy thrives when every voice is heard and when every vote is cast and counted. And what we're doing is taking action. We are writing postcards to Texas voters. And maybe some of you are familiar with Reclaim Our Vote and the postcard campaigns that they do. If you're not, I urge you to check it out. But so Every Voice, Every Vote, through the Religious Action Center, the postcards are really coming from the Reclaim Our Vote. We are sending handwritten postcards and hand-addressed postcards to Texas voters. These are people, we ordered 1,000 postcards, and these are people who live in underserved communities, primarily people of color, and these are registered voters who received the postcards. They have voted, they will vote, they don't vote all the time, and nobody ever asks them to vote. So they are low propensity, high opportunity voters. And Reclaim Our Vote has already said through their research, they know the results are about 3% increase in voter turnout. So anyway, this morning, we've got a busy few weeks. We're going to hand address and handwrite 1,000 postcards, and we're about halfway there, and we'll put them in the mail October 1st. So some of the programs that we've had in the last 3 years and some of these were on Zoom and some were in person. You know how it goes. Zoom is a thing now, of course. Texas Legislature 101. Know how your Texas legislature works. That was a good program. The history of the Jim Crow laws in Dallas. We did that. We went to the Dallas Holocaust Museum and we did the special exhibit tour about the Jim Crow days in Dallas. We got on a bus. We get on the bus. It was a tour of the Dallas African American and Jewish historical sites in Dallas. That was about the most fun thing I remember us ever doing. It was a great day with our sisterhood in Dallas. We have had 2 programs with the same name. It's called A Day in the Life of a Legislative Assistant. So when we are members here of the women's organization, the Sisterhood, we are automatically members of Women of Reformed Judaism, which is the broader organization. So in Washington, D.C., there is a legislative assistant that we pay for. Our sisterhoods, we give money to the Women of Reformed Judaism, and WRJ pays for, that's just one of the things that we fund, but this legislative assistant is always somebody young, right out of college. But anyway, so we've had 2 of them come and tell us what they're doing every day. It's fantastic. We have had a voter information program with the Texas Civil Rights Project, Know the Laws and Know Your Rights. We participated with the National Council of Jewish Women, NCJW, with Repro Shabbat last February. We're going to do it again this February. Thank you, Rabbi Nancy Kasten, for coming to deliver the sermon, a meaningful sermon to us that night here at Temple Shalom. We have a program coming up on September 4th. Reproductive freedom is religious freedom. We're going to have a presentation from the Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. I told you about the postcards. And on top of all that, we provide our congregation with information about when and where to vote, and how to vote by mail and so forth. So how to become a voter registration of EDR. We encourage people to be a poll worker. We encourage people, of course, to vote. And we cleaned the pantry a couple of times at Jewish Family Services. We have filled little snack bags for the kids at Family Gateway. We knitted little hats and donated them to chemotherapy patients. Those are some of our Tikkun Olam projects. And we have much more in the works. So we're pretty busy with social justice here at Temple Shalom.
I'm exhausted being just hearing it. It's a lot of good work. Thank you. At Arapaho United Methodist Church, we have a number of justice-related initiatives. But a lot of what we've done from an advocacy standpoint recently is partnering with Texas Impact. We typically send 3 or 4, this year hopefully more, people to the legislative session, Texas Impact at the end of January. And we come back from that invigorated, having learned how to speak with legislators and really focus on particular issues. One thing that we did this year was in our justice ministry table, which is a group of about 5 people. If you're on that team, would you raise your hand real quick? Yeah. So they're here. We scoured our database for people, not just members, but people in our database who had participated at Arapaho United Methodist Church at least 3 times in something, not just going to worship, not just anything, but maybe going to an outing, or maybe participating in a Bible study that they had 3 times in 18 months. And we shipped that off to Texas Impact, and they pulled it all together and said, here are the districts in Texas that your active people are members of, are constituents of those. Now, some of them were logical, but because we are a destination church, that people come from Frisco, they come from far Plano, they come from Wiley, they come from kind of all over the place. It was surprising to see how many were in a particular district. And so that ministry table has taken it upon themselves to go visit those legislators and talk about, I may not live in your district, but I am a pastor of a church where 100 people live in your district. And we want to share with you what our issues are this year: election integrity, reproductive justice, and policy, and public education. And we have talking points that we've mentioned to each of those. It's been incredibly enlightening to us, not really trying to change minds right now, but to hear what we might hear and bring back to envelop more change in the systemic part. One thing that we're meeting on, sorry guys, but we're meeting on sometime this week. And we want to really, I forget where I heard this, so someone here may take credit for this. I just wish I knew who it was. But learn if our congregation really represents what they say they represent. Let me give you an example. I think it was someone at Texas Impact. I think B may have told me this, but that if you were to ask our congregation or your congregation, what percentage of our congregation votes? I asked my husband that last night, and he said, it's got to be 70 or above.
Everyone, right? We all vote, right?
Yeah, we all vote. It's got to be 70 or above, right? That's probably low, right? Because we just believe that. And my question back to Steve was, well, what if it's 25? And he said, well, that would surprise me. And I said, and I would be disappointed. Is that fair to say that I'd be disappointed that it was 25? So we are trying to work with Texas Impact. The next thing with our database is if there's a way, which I know there is, to just say if they voted. And start a baseline. Let's say it's 25%. And then work towards it being 40%. And so we could see the effect of what this advocacy and work has been. I really hope it's not 25%. I really do. But one of the things that we're going to talk about in our next meeting is how we represent that to the congregation. If you can imagine some of the fundraisers that are done in schools, and they have like the little temperature gauge, and it moves up with red as you get to your goal, something like that. And maybe it's a big hardback poster with the letters vote on them, and people bring their voting sticker and put it on there so we can fill up that vote in the lobby so that we know that we're doing it. Not with names or anything like that, but how can we represent that to each other, that we're all in this together, and that it's not just a function of one sticker being up there. That looks great on Instagram, but I want to see 500 stickers up there, knowing that we did our part to move forward and to calm the waters with our vote.
I love that. If y'all do it, post it, tag Texas Impact. Danielle.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to thank you for centering that Kairos moment that we are in, because I believe that is real and part of being prepared, because you never know when a Kairos moment is going to happen, but that's why we do the slow, I call this slow work. Because it's not an overnight thing that we do. We have to be very consistent and committed to it. So thank you for that. So I think that's where we are. What are we doing? Well, if I forget, I'll probably forget something, because like you all were doing so much. But what we are doing, particularly for the summer and the fall, we're calling it Faith, Democracy, and the Future is the overarching title. And we have two separate ways to go. We have the summer of empowerment and the fall of empowerment, namely because we also are commemorating the 60th anniversary of Freedom Summer, which obviously was not only the drive to the right to vote, but was much more than that. That being the central thing about voter registration, education, and voter turnout. So during the summer, what we've done so far, I'll categorize it. We do teach-ins, we do trainings, and we do listening sessions. So for teach-ins, for example, we did an all-male listening session where over 300 Black men came, and the idea was just to listen. We had question prompts, because looking at data and looking at documentaries and looking at news reports, how Black men were not engaging, and they felt not engaged and not heard, right? So we specifically did that listening session. We recently did one with Gen Z, who is the future of our electorate. And I would encourage all of us to be very intentional about really participating and reaching out to Gen Zers and really, getting their feedback and how they see the future. What are their worries? What are their fears, etc. Because they're the future, and we must be able to empower them with the right information. Because there's a lot of disinformation and misinformation out there on all social media platforms that people listen to. So we recently did that with Gen Z and millennials, and it was very interesting to hear the feedback. Because what we may be thinking by, some of us being older voters, put myself in that category now. Most of us already, our IQ as it relates to voting and political systems is kind of high, right? So it's how do we get those generations to also hear them, what they're thinking about, because that should inform what we do. Right, we should do that based on what people are thinking and feeling is how we should inform the work that we do. So we do the listening sessions. The teach-ins are very numerous, right? So part of the teach-ins are, how does your government work? So fundamentally we just did already how your local government is set up and how it should work theoretically. We know it didn't always work the way it looks on paper, right? So we do a series of how government works. We'll now do the county and state, and then we'll do federal. Because oftentimes we will hear people say, well, I'm not voting because this person didn't do X, Y, and Z, and then I have to say, that's not what they do. So sometimes people are not engaged and not voting because they're not sure how government really works and who's responsible at each level. So those are some of the trainings that we do. That's a teaching that we do, how government works, that's an example. And then we're also doing a series of trainings. Some of that is around being a VDR, some of that is around coming to learn what does it mean to actually work the polls. Because it's also important, not just voting, just not registering to vote, turning out to vote. We give a lot of attention to that. It's necessary, but for me, I always think about how are we building pipelines, how are we building infrastructure to do this work beyond election day. And that's how you can step into a Kairos moment for a change to happen, because you're prepared and you have infrastructure. So for me, I'm big on I'm an institutionalist by nature. I believe in building strong systems and institutions so that the work can continue regardless of who's in place. And so that's the idea of the fall and summer. So we're doing all those kind of activities to empower people, to show them where they have power, engage and invite them to be a part of what we're doing so they can learn to be an election judge. They can learn how systems work. They can be heard so that they can inform what we do. So what we're doing all month of August also, we did it today, every Sunday we are also organizing the entire congregation, right? So like, hey, you want to be a poll worker? Sign up. Do you want to do canvassing? So we're going to canvass. We're going to do high touch voter engagement. We adopted the precinct around the church, which is pretty huge. So we're going to go knock on doors and talk to people and get their feedback. We're going to do a series of phone banking, right? We're also going to do a series of making sure that we organize people to get rides to the polls. So it's a series of things that we're doing, not just for the election season. It's going to impact our election season, we hope. But we hope that beyond that, people see, I need to be civically engaged on a number of levels. I need to serve on park boards, right? Because in Dallas, the city of Dallas, you're part of the city structure. citizens sit on those boards, and those can be powerful boards for your neighborhood. So we're trying to build beyond the election, but we know people are even more so excited about the election. I see a turn in some people's faces and conversations. So we hope that translates into beyond November. How are you going to stay engaged and connected, right? So those are some of the activities that we are doing that we hope will be long-term and not just for the moment. I know I'm missing some things that we do, but those are like the high-touch things, right? To get people engaged in the election, but also empower them to be prepared to do the work that we're currently doing and to move us into the 89th legislative session as well. Because we also do a lot of training. I'm sure you all use Texas Impact training, advocacy training. So we use it to do that, and we also do a lot of organizing training. So we do organizing 101. We also do a session on how do you understand how systems, institutions work. We do something on the the power, the promise, and the poison of public policy. Like, we really show people that you cannot do anything in your life where policies and laws don't dictate that. So it's better to understand it so you know how to engage it. So that's some of the work that we are doing at Friendship West.
I love that. Amen, right? And the gold star for the election workers work that y'all are doing. I know we talked a lot about that 4 years ago. We talked a lot about that 2 years ago. Still a need, maybe more so of a need for people to sign up to be election workers. I was just given a note that says y'all were handed note cards if you have questions for the panel. We'll see if we have time to get to some based on your responses to this next question. But hold those up if you have a question. I'm going to ask one more, and then we'll see if we have time for others. So, hint maybe shorter answers. Not shorter, that was mean, right? They've been perfect answers. But hey, so what if you listen to the podcast, if you've seen us at events before, one of the things I often say is this isn't like for y'all to come have fun and like watch a good show and then go home and go back to your normal lives. The purpose of these events is to go home with a homework assignment or to go home planning to do some work. So I'm going to let y'all as a panel give them some homework, give them a challenge. What do you hope folks will do when they return back to their congregation, when they return back to their community? What's your charge?
Short and sweet. I guess short and sweet. The Talmud says, where there is no one to fill a particular role, accept that role upon yourself. So go home and pick up the role and do it.
Love.
Well, that's pretty much what I was going to say. Determine where you feel comfortable engaging in the work, because we all have different skills, and abilities. And I just always tell people, whatever you have to offer, we need it in the work. Find out what it is and just plug in. That's my short answer.
We only use so little time, I can take more. I want to say that find your person, find your encourager, find the person that lifts you up, because clearly you have a passion or you wouldn't be here. You have a conviction for social justice and working towards something. Find who that person is. Get a buddy that you can talk to, who can lift you up. I shared something in a class this morning about, again, that summer that I was there. We went to the Martin Luther King National Monument in DC. And if you can imagine what the monument looks like, it's built out of mountains in 3 parts, and 2 of them in the background are built with mountains to them. They're chiseled out of rock or granite or whatever it is, but they look like mountains. And the 3rd is the monument, the bust of, or the carving of Martin Luther King. And if you stand beside the mountains, you can see that the 3rd part, which is Martin Luther King, pushes out from that mountain. And what the artists were trying to convey was that out of a mountain of despair comes a stone of hope. Wow. That pushes forward. Out of a mountain of despair comes a stone of hope. And the reason that I said find your person, find your encourager, find the person that will lift you up to continue to use your voice, is that will give you some self-care and it will keep you focused on hope. And that's really what we need to do.
Thank you. Okay, I have a comment about advocacy, something that I've learned, because I forgot, I was going on and on, I forgot to tell you about all the advocating we've done, how many times we've called our legislators. So I won't go into all that, but I will say that reasonable expectations, like it's really important when we have an action alert, like call your Texas legislature today. To do it, pick up the phone and make the call. But there may only be 5 of you that do that, 5 or 10 people who actually pick up the phone or send the email or write the postcard, whatever. But those add up so much, they really do. Just do it, just do it. So few people will answer that call, but when you click on a link and you automatically send an email to your representatives, those add up. But one example, we had a Zoom meeting with Senator John Cornyn's staffer, Jack Youngblood. And this was a statewide, it was the Religious Action Center, RAC, Texas. So it was just in Texas. And there were 75 of us on the call, and then Jack Youngblood. But 15 of us were from Temple Shalom. Now think about it, that's a big impact, right? 15 people out of 75, when you got from all over the state of Texas, people were there. But do we know what's involved in getting 15 people? Did any of us get 15 people here today, right? It's a big deal to get 15 people to show up. It takes phone calls and emails and so forth. But when we do show up, and when the 15 of us were there, it made a difference. If only 5 of us had been there, it makes a difference. But anyway, just 5 or 10 of us, when we take action, and a whole bunch of other groups are doing it too, it makes a difference.
I love that. I see the Arapaho people counting this evening. I did get a question from the audience, and I'm going to put a little of my own framing on this one, and this will be our last question before we move into the next panel. I was in a camp this summer, and I had 3 leadership high school students, like seniors and incoming freshmen, who didn't know what they were walking into because we didn't know each other very well, but they told me that they didn't plan on voting. And I've been thinking about that a lot because they cared about their community, they cared about people, they cared about all the things they should be caring about, but didn't feel that when they could vote, they would do that because they didn't feel like it was worthwhile. Broke my soul, y'all. I heard you all moan. Like, you feel the same way, but we all know these people, right? And we've talked about the younger generation. So the question, how do you convince someone who feels that there's nothing or no one worth voting for, or that their votes have no effect, mentions the Electoral College, mentions the presidential election. But for those people who don't feel that their vote is worthwhile or they're not going to spend the time, what would you say to them?
I'm gonna have to think about that for a second.
Ponder on that one.
So I have a 30-year-old and a 23-year-old. The oldest is a girl and the youngest is a boy. And I've talked to Jack, our youngest, sometimes when I'm frustrated. I think I'm just gonna move. I think Steve and I are just gonna move from Texas because we're just so frustrated. And he reminds me that, that stands against everything that you've been working for your whole life, right? And so I turn that a little bit onto others, that the youngsters, when they say it's not gonna make a difference, the word yet comes up. The word hope comes up. I don't know what I say specifically to that person. It's different for each person, but I always use the word yet, and I usually use the word hope, and I usually mention that we are not just voting for one person, or one position. We are voting for several positions, and within all of those positions, there is hope that change will come. That's
How if they're voting for their kids?
Well, these are the kids. They're not thinking about kids.
Okay, we are standing on the shoulders of those who came before us. And I thought, was it a couple of years ago, I guess, that we celebrated the 100-year anniversary of the women getting the right to vote, right? So those men and women worked for 75 to 100 years. I don't know how long they worked for, a long time to make that happen. And there were a lot of people who worked really hard on women getting the right to vote. And they didn't live to see the day, but we reap the benefits of that. So we are standing on their shoulders, and the people coming after us are going to stand on our shoulders, and we've just got to keep it going. We're not going to give up. Anyway, it is not our job to finish the work, but neither are we at liberty to neglect it.
So, wow. it's not an easy answer, I would say that, because everything is there's so many intersections to deal with. But I always think about James Baldwin's quote that says, I can't believe what you say because I see what you do. And so for a lot of people, right, we're saying vote, it makes a difference what they see, right, what policies and laws are put in place. They're seeing what's happening. For a lot of our young people, that is what they're looking for. When they see that, they're like, well, why should I vote? I see this happens and this happens. So a way of engaging and encouraging people to vote. Because when you think about racial democracy, it's only been 60 years for Black folks who have the right to vote. So right, that's somebody who lived in their lifetime. Somebody still alive who was there. And so I think for us, but we can only say that to our younger generation. People die for the right to vote, and right, really, they're like, I'm seeing what I'm catching out here every day. So I need to be able to relate. So a way of doing that, I remember Dr. Haynes told the story he was teaching at Paul Quinn as an adjunct one semester, and a young guy was in the class, and he was saying he wasn't gonna vote. It didn't matter why should he vote, and so Dr. Haynes just asked him, I think he may have had a run-in with the law at some point, and so he asked him, well, what judge was sitting on the bench when you were in court? So he explained how hard and difficult it was with the judge he had. So Dr. Haynes said, well, when you vote, this is an impact, right? Some judges are elected, some are appointed. If they're appointed by somebody who was elected, right? So some of it is being able to relate to people in their everyday life, their life between Sundays, right? How can you tell them how voting and not voting can impact their daily living? Yeah. You just have to make it real for people, right? And begin to let them know. So this is a way for you to change systems when you vote. But that's why I'm saying it's not just about telling people to go vote. You have to be able to get people to understand how the system works and show them ways in which civic engagement, again, is more than voting. Sometimes it may be you become a civil servant, right? You may be an elected. So you have to be able to show people that it's a system, right? Voting is part of that. So I think you have to show people more than just that moment, because when the moment is over, somebody has to trail those who got elected to see, are they doing what they said they were going to do?
Yeah, and I think I love that. Also, I don't want to attack the premise of the question, but we think so much about elections in terms of presidential elections. Right. But you're right that those judges are elected. Looking at Grace over here in a room full of, we have several public school defenders in here who spent the last year working on school board issues, fighting back against Christian nationalism in our schools and book bans and curriculum and chaplains in schools. I think Josh used to staff that and said, you can't win a presidential election unless you can win a state. You can't win a state if you can't win a house district. You can't win a house district if you can't win a school board election. So why not try to go win some school board elections, right? And that's something that we can certainly impact as congregations, as people, as we can pay attention to what's happening at the local level, city council, school board, and those votes matter a lot, right? And so focus on those. Right.
Can I say one more? Because to your point,
I'm not going to cut you off.
So to your point, I think this is why it's so important, right? I always go back to 2008 or 7 when Obama was elected, right? Immediately, right? To your point about local elections and the rise of the Tea Party, right? And white Christian nationalism has always been with us. But I think that era ushered in more of the public facing, where now it's not undercover, right? It's like in our faces. And so what I would tell people, but it was a brilliant tactic, right? Let's win everything local and then we go up. Because here's the reality. If you're an elected, it's always easier to get an elected than elected. Right? And so that's part of why I tell people run for office. It doesn't matter what it is. If you feel compelled to do that, run for that office, and then you can move up or stay there if you feel you're most impactful. But that's why voting is critical in every election, whether it's a bond election, amendment election, and then how do we make sure we put the education out there? So, because those can be confusing when you read bond and wording, right? In Dallas, we had, this multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar bond for public safety. That sounds good to everybody until they tell you we're putting these billions into, more militarized training. And we know what that translates for Black and brown communities. So you have to be able to show why your local electeds are, because they're making those decisions and they're passing those things down to the city, and just seeing what are some of the ways you push to even change the way they function, right? So what's this idea? You have city council meetings during the daytime, people are working. People most impacted who don't have the privilege to leave, like I can go downtown and sit all day. Most people can't do that, right? So it's also showing how sometimes it's designed for people not to engage. And so how do we then, but that's the whole movement in and of itself, to push for something, a difference. So just showing people that you have the power, all types of power, right? The solidarity power is important. The narrative power is like all the ways that we have power to really shift and change the systems and institutions that I think need to be deconstructed and reconstructed. But I'm not one to say tear down and don't have a plan for building it back up, right? You just can't get rid of something, then it's like, well, then what? So I think that's the slow work, that's the intellectual work that has to happen. And so that's why I say everybody has a place in this movement. It's how do we look at our congregations and say, here's where we need you, and let people fill in. And I want to go back to something you said about your voting. When you look at your congregation, are you looking into your congregation, or are you looking to see how percentage of voting, how percentage of voting, how high? So we did that last election. We ran our database through, because I was nervous. So I'm like, surely you don't go to this church and not vote, but I was very surprised, right? We had a high voting percentage. So then that didn't know, oh, okay, but somewhere here they're only voting. How can I get them to take the next step and be more engaged in the work ongoing? Right. So that's an excellent thing you're doing, because that can really let you know where should you start, right? To increase that. So I think that's always great when you can survey, and I survey the congregation quite often. Because people change, we have a whole new group. We had 200 people join the church in 3 months. That's a whole church. So that tells me I need to then do some type of survey so I can figure out, where do you live? What's important to you? Do you vote? Are you registered? Etc. I would say it's also important to do that wherever however small, whatever size your congregation, know who you have, what they have to offer, and what's their engagement currently, and then go from there. Because you can build I believe you can really organize your congregation. That just spreads out, because church, they're going to tell somebody else, it's going to tell somebody else who wants to come and be a part of it.
Yeah. All right, I could talk to y'all all day, and this has been fantastic. They've been great, right? I really feel like y'all have helped answer the why question, and the next panel and the breakouts coming up soon are going to talk about the what and the how. But thanks for starting it out with a really incredible start. Who's ready to get to work? Hey, for real. The hands raised, I'm out of here. We've got an audio video. Let's try that again. Who's ready to get to work? All right. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with the panel. I know I definitely enjoyed the event, but like I told them, and I know I've said it on this podcast, I hope everyone is having a good time, but the real work begins when you turn off the pod or return home. We have real work that needs to be done to create a better and more just Texas. So I hope this is a tool for you, and I can't wait to hear about your next steps. Our faith traditions call us to engage and work for justice and equity for all people, to care for our neighbors and communities. Now is the moment to act to make that a reality. If not now, when? As always, Texas Impact has tools for you. I especially hope everyone is using the Texas Faith Votes resources. You can find those and so much more at texasimpact.org. While you're there, I hope you'll take a moment to sign up to be a member of Texas Impact. Your membership supports this podcast and all of the work to engage Texans of faith to advocate for a more just and equitable Texas. If you have questions about any of it, please reach out. You can reach me at scott@texasimpact.org. And with that, I think it's time to close out this episode. So remember, the world needs Texans of faith active and engaged. So let's get to work.
Weekly Witness is hosted by Scott Atnett, engineered and produced by David Fasalo. Our executive producer is B. Moorhead. The opinions expressed on Weekly Witness are those of Texas Impact and our guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views of our sponsors. Weekly Witness is a product of Texas Impact, people of faith working for justice. Visit us online at texasimpact.org.